Hey guys, what's up? Stock Retail coming back to you. Boy, it was an eventful day, and I'm sure that is an understatement for most of us. Actually, really, I would say this kind of started in earnest on Friday, and I had made a quick video, kind of came and talked to you guys about what I saw Friday because I just wanted to calm nerves and say, hey, this matches a lot of things that myself and some others have been telling you would come. Um, and showed a little bit about that on Friday. And then last night, if you follow me on Twitter, you saw I was already talking about, and obviously a lot of people were, so I'm not just claiming this corner, but talking about how things were going in Japan, a lot of stuff with the Bank of Japan and the Japanese yen carry trade, and a lot of stuff you're starting to see out there. So it was obvious the rumblings started last night in terms of what went down this morning and through the day today. And so, big enough events that I want to come back and talk about it. I want to show you how this ties together, tell the story a little bit again of things that we've seen coming. And so, I know there'll be little bits and pieces of this that will be repeat. Some of this will be new. And then, what I'd say too is on the stuff, even that's a repeat, it's just sort of a scientific fact that generally, if you hear things a few times, it starts to sink in better and you start to understand it deeper. So, worth going through again and just really unpacking, man, what's going on? Here on this slide, I'm saying, AMC, Bitcoin, Japan, the market meltdown. There's a lot more. And so, let's just kind of go through this and talk it over. And what I hope it will do is will confirm the thesis for some of you and will also for others just help you see, you know, uh, in times like this, it feels chaotic. I chose this word chaos for a reason. Although interesting, being a little bit of an AMC guy, you can see Borderlands is coming out and even the tag Chaos Loves Company. Um, but it can feel chaotic and that can be anxiety inducing. And so for those of you who that's what's going on and you're going like what in the world is happening and you feel the foundations shaking and some stuff like that, it is big what's going on. But when you can understand it, that also can help kind of calm some frazzled nerves, give you a sense of at least an understanding of what's going on out there. I'm not going to pretend that I know everything, but you're going to see that at least I knew a lot of this, and it's been self evident for a while. So let's go through a series of slides here. I had said on Twitter that I was going to try to go live today. If you're wondering why I ended up recording, um, I just have never gone live before, and I realized it was going to take a minute to figure some things out. You got to have software and some other stuff. And so just decided to go ahead and record today. All right. So what I'm going to show you is that in particular, if you followed me on Twitter, you've seen a lot of this coming. And I'm, again, not saying at all that I'm the only one. There are smarter people than me who've seen some of this coming. But in particular, there aren't that many people who've been trying to make it clear to the public. I think larger players have been sort of moving pieces behind closed doors in many ways. And so it takes a little bit of paying attention. So first off, keep in mind, what you saw Friday, what you've been honestly seeing developing for a couple months is a lot going on with the Japanese yen in terms of foreign exchange rates, in particular its valuation against the dollar. The Bank of Japan effectively has been fighting to sort of save the yen, but on the other hand, there is an interest rate discussion on. They've basically carried negative interest rates for kind of a generation, pretty much, which has promoted some interesting trades throughout the world. So basically, the whole world has been kind of connected into this, and so you've got this push pull going on with with Japan's currency, which obviously their economy depends on the value of that currency. So we get into some discussions about fiat, right? Again, um, side note, you would have seen me tweet a while back too that I think it's Japan's largest pension fund had started buying Bitcoin. So there were signals that some things were going on with the Japanese yen. But look at this post too that I posted in January of this year. So we're talking 7 months ago, where I was warning you. I'll just read it here. Bank of Japan last published report: roughly 5 trillion in U.S. dollar liabilities. Evergrande is something we've all watched, but might be a sideshow. I was trying to give the signal that, hey, people are out there are kind of talking about, you've seen the stuff in China with Evergrande, the real estate kind of meltdown, but that in some ways could basically be small potatoes compared to what we were going to watch in Japan. And here we are. This is what's happening. So just one receipt there to show you, I was kind of signaling to you a little bit about that and what was coming. Um, doesn't mean I knew for sure this was going to happen at this time or anything like that. I could have made a lot of money if I knew that detail. um, but in general, had the idea at a large level of what was going on. And keep in mind, so this first bullet I'll come back to, we've got Nomura, we've got Archegos, we've got the connection to Credit Suisse, we've got the swaps. So you start to hear things that if you've been in GameStop or AMC, you're well familiar with. And you've watched that sort of play or drama unfold over the last few years. And so it's got its roots in some ways in Japan. So you're going to see some banks, SoftBank, like I said, Bank of Japan, there's some other things going on there where there's just this unwinding of a lot of past decisions that is ongoing. And for me, that can lead to some bullishness for AMC and GameStop. But we've got to watch it all kind of play out. Just the point is, you were kind of told, if you're following me, that this was coming. I sort of put eyes on Japan clear back in January. The other thing, just so you know, a little bit of history, if you go back and really dig through, you can just Google kind of Jekyll Island and the Fed. So now I'm talking about the U.S. central bank and the creation of the whole central banking system, really. And if you go through and kind of do a little DD on all the players involved, there are relationships to Japan even back then. So you get some really deep dot connections in terms of, let's say, the whole global monetary system and all the things going on right now. You can kind of trace back to sort of the origins of central banking and a lot of really bad policies, things that are not good for the people that have happened now for a couple generations. And there are connections to Japan. So I'm just drawing your eyes to that too. Maybe we'll talk more about that in the future. All right, what else has been there? So I'm saying leverage, leverage, leverage. So this is, I've pointed you to this a few times on this channel. I get new followers all the time, so just going to highlight it and breeze by it. If you want to find this out on Reddit, you can see just slightly different username on Reddit, stock_retail. An article I had posted in, I think, 2021 that really just spelled out all of this. Even, by the way, there's a little bit of a primer in here that actually tells you how margin calls work. You would read in here that I once had a $1 margin call. And so I won't go through all of that. You can read that. But I think of margins as a little bit of a seesaw that you've got to keep in balance. If you get off on one side, sometimes you have to either sell positions to get the teeter-totter back in shape, or you can inject cash. But what if people don't have cash? So what have you seen the last few days? You've seen just a widespread selling push. So that is why you'll see some people out there talking about margin calls. And you could read how 3 years ago I told you this was going to play out. I warned you that now often in AMC and GameStop, people talk about margin calls as they're getting called on their AMC and GameStop shorts, right? But that is not what has to happen. There's a lot of leverage out there. I talk about it in this article. We're talking like in some cases hundreds of times leverage. It's a big part of what happened in 2008 and some of us see replaying now. And then if you think about multipliers, so second bullet at the bottom, leverage times risk times basically digging holes to cover holes. That's our last 3.5 years of the journey where just shorts were getting piled on shorts, swaps, derivatives, tokens, every last attempt to keep AMC and GameStop from really breaking out has created just this massive tangled web of leverage. Leverage really just means in effect holding positions more than what you actually have invested, and that means you've taken a loan to hold those positions. That's margin. Margin is a loan. Go read this article. It'll explain all of it. How in 2020 I made a lot of money trading on margin. You can, by the way, margins are not just on shorts. You'd also see that in this article. Margins can be on longs, which relates to all you're seeing. So let's keep going. I had told you. Here's a couple December tweets from the end of last year. And guys, this isn't just going to be about, oh, I told you. What I'm showing you is not so much a brag about me telling you. What I'm showing you is here's what's going on. Go read these tweets or go look at these articles and you will start to understand what's happening. And so, yes, in part, I'm saying, hey, I told you this was happening, but I'm also pointing you to where you can go to understand it a little bit. So in December, so speaking of margins, I had basically said, I think they're pumping a lot of long positions to support their margins. So think back to that teeter totter. If on the right side of the teeter totter, let's say I hold shorts in AMC or something like that, or by the way, there's heavy shorts against Bitcoin. If you're into Bitcoin and you're watching this channel, same kind of idea. So if on the right side I'm shorting Bitcoin or I'm shorting U.S. Treasuries or some things like that, and maybe on the left side I'm holding a long position in Nvidia. If Nvidia is going up and up and up and up and up, let's call that a pump, right? If it's not value driven, it's a pump. That's just, I'm separating. If it's an actual fundamental thesis that you can justify a valuation, that's awesome. If you can't really explain the valuation, then you start to wonder if that's at least, what did Alan Greenspan call it years ago? Irrational exuberance, basically hype, or perhaps even a pump. So let's say on the left side of this teeter-totter, NVIDIA, I'm way up on my long position. So I can support my margins. We're back to this margin, this leverage thing. Go read that article from Reddit and you'll understand what I'm saying. And but what happens if something goes south and people start pulling that out for liquidity or something? Or it just pops on them and they didn't get their profits out in time. Well, now that one side of the teeter-totter is too light and your leverage side, those shorts, gets heavier. Now you got to either sell off some shorts, and what do? You buy to cover, right? You got to buy to close, which would put a lot of buying pressure on AMC and Gamestop and Bitcoin. Or, so if you can't cover your shorts, you've got to sell off longs. You basically get more cash, balance that back out. So what I was saying here in this top right tweet in December, I was warning you that if they're supporting margins with their longs, if anything starts to happen, you're going to see widespread sell-off. Well, what did you see Friday and today? Widespread sell-off. And don't underestimate all that I said about how this is related to that Japanese yen carry trade and all that. It's all related. But I suppose you could argue whether I actually knew, but now it's turning out I was right. I believed very strongly that you can see the SPY, Treasury shorts, the Magnificent Seven, in particular things like NVIDIA and Amazon and some others, were effectively pumped to maintain margins for some pretty big players. And then you can see also on December 13th at the bottom right, I was telling you, and it's like some 12-point tweet. You can go read that on your own time. But I was spelling out the case for why I believed perhaps a crash was coming. This was while some folks were kind of making fun of me and saying, what are you talking about? It's a total bullish run and all of that. So I'm just telling you, second bullet at the bottom left, macros and valuations were giving us a signal. So people shouldn't be acting surprised. There's going to be people who tell you, oh, this is all about, Iran and Middle East tensions and stuff like that. We're going to talk about that too. That's basically narrative. What I'm telling you is the numbers, the information, the DD was telling us this was coming. And I was telling you this was coming. So part of this is just a bubble popping and it causes sell-off pressure because of margins and leverage. So that's why these last two. All right, but what else has been going on? So something else I showed you, I guess this one is from February. Pardon me. By the way, if you're new here, I apologize. I'm coming off a pretty big cough. I'm trying to hold that at a minimum. Hopefully, normally when you watch my videos, you won't get this cough. All right, so if you look, there's a website called Fred. You can go look at a lot of interesting information about sort of the U.S. economy and the Federal Reserve, money printing. You can go see that there. I've posted some about that, especially in relationship to Bitcoin and why I'm a believer in Bitcoin. But you can see, so this is Federal Reserve assets held. They basically end up with assets on their book. And remember, the Federal Reserve is not a government agency. It's basically a private bank. And so you can see what I was showing you. Look at 2008 to 2020, basically, and then from kind of 2020 to now. So you can see effectively these couple of bumps that we had. 2008 and 2020 are really still on the books. That was can kicking, is what I'm trying to tell you. That wasn't dealt with they basically just postponed the pain. And so what's been going on, and just think about Occupy Wall Street as well, and the Tea Party movement. You know, I don't get political here. Some of you, actually, I'm going to annoy all of you because some of you are maybe towards the left and some of you are towards the right. I often believed that Occupy and the Tea Party, in many ways, wanted the same thing. They were very tired of deep centralization, of the 0.1% making terrible decisions that don't put bread on the table. You would have seen me tweeting things like taking food off of tables and clothes off of backs. We have a system that is not helping the people, it is helping the top. I believe that strongly, and I believe that's wrong, and I believe many of us are working to undo that and to shift culture. But let's not go too deep on that. The point is, decisions were made to delay pain, which allowed terrible decision makers, the people who caused 2008, the people who caused 2020. By the way, 2020, the financial system was already melting down before COVID lockdowns. Don't get fooled. Go back and look at what was really happening. The financial system was undergoing some big tremors, and perhaps I don't want to get into conspiracy theories. In fact, I generally stay away from that here. But what I am telling you is before lockdowns, there already was significant financial tremors throughout the system. Massive risk was going on, and you can go find out about that. But the point is, things like the money printer go burr, decisions to sort of protect large entities and not let them feel the consequences of their own bad decisions, that is all still on the books. So bottom left point, and you can see some more information in that tweet if you want to go there, but there may be a large unwinding that's just never really happened, has yet to have been allowed to happen. And so there's a lot of past decisions that are still sitting on current books, is what I'm trying to tell you. So that was another reason I could see some things coming. What else? So we know about tokens, or if you don't know about it, so that's securitized token offerings, STOs, or a lot of us just call them stokens, stock tokens. I had written about that, you can see again on Reddit, in 2021. Especially, I don't know if you are aware, in the AMC community, there was a very, very aggressive, even bullying push, even on Gasparino's show and some other. So we're talking like national television, some billionaire shorts, people who came at me particularly hard, who were trying to force AMC to tokenize our stock. And so you would have seen a lot about FTX. You can see here FTX, Binance, Bittrex, a lot more. And so another reason that some of us have seen what's coming, and I believe Kitty, DFE, was on this before most of us. He certainly knew about the swaps. That's pretty obvious to me. Perhaps I was one of the first on the tokens. At least I was the first I knew of that was pretty loud and public and put down all these receipts about it. But it's all related, because if you don't know, the tokens were created the night before the buy button was removed. So go all the way back to January of 2021. And then what happened, and so I'm not going to go through this whole tweet on the right, but you can just see I was telling you where we were going. And so I'm also telling you again today why everything that's happening makes sense and it's not freaking me out. I'm very calm about what's going on because it's all part of the logical path that was predicted. Basically, APE. So if you're not aware, AMC created sort of a secondary stock, a preferred equity share, and because of the nature of preferred equity stock, I believe that shocked the system. You can go back and see after APE was created, that is when FTX melted down, and that is when AMC's cost to borrow ran to 1,000%. Yes, I said that, 1,000% cost to borrow one share back then. It happened twice, and it all happened after APE, and it all was connected to FTX. So it was kind of APE, then the domino was FTX went down, you had all the regional bank runs, and then you had AMC's cost to borrow going when FTX went down. And since then, you've had Sam and CZ go to jail. They were both involved. I believe very strongly that we're still yet to see the cleanup, and I've kind of given you hints over the past year or so about that. So what I'm telling you, though, is all of this massive market-wide tremors and sell-offs and all of that, just keep connecting all the dots. If you've got Archegos, you got Nomura, you got a lot of things going on in Japan, you got decades of bad decisions, pile on top of that shorts that they're trying to hide, swaps that they're trying to hide, and the use of tokens to do it, there is this massive ball of manipulation, fraud, corruption, and trying to basically band aid over terrible risk management with new bad decisions. They're piling bad decisions on top of bad decisions. And all of this is going to come home to roost. So, smart contracts, I'm just sort of teasing the folks who did this. Smart contracts that turned out to be dumb. So what I'm telling you is all that you're seeing going on from like Friday to today and really the last month, all of this mess, it's all related. So, little bit of confirmation. We're starting to get some more of the thesis confirmed. In a sea of red today, I only saw 2 green. Now, I mean, so on Bitcoin in particular, you could say, well, did you watch it over the last few days before this? Yes, there's been a large dip. I continue to say my thesis on Bitcoin is years and decades, not days and hours. So I'm not concerned about that. Pardon me. But interesting, at least on AMC for sure, in terms of equity stocks, there were not very many green stocks today. And if you looked in pre-market at one point, it was all the way down at 422. So to see the strength to roar back, I think at one point it got to like, I don't know, 512, or maybe it was even higher than that. A little bit of kind of softening into the end of the day. And I know this morning we had seen there were like over 3 million shares to borrow. Usually what happens is when there's millions of shares to borrow, we see those gobbled up and we see massive short attacks. And that's been ongoing for years as well. So just imagine the effect of years of rehypothecation, millions of shares shorting. There is a day when that comes to an end, and this is going to get pretty wild. So kind of confirmation to see as the market was melting down. I told you about all the leveraged positions, AMC holding itself strong. It's pretty flat, to be honest, but it is green, and in a sea of red, where you've got Magnificent Seven and some other things down, in some cases double digits. That is quite impressive. And then I've told you in the past, and telling you again, watch the VIX. Notice today that was up 65%. In the last month, you can see this view up over 200%. That's something else I've said to watch. So real quick recap. Let me go back through real quick. I pointed your eyes to Japan. I told you it's all about leverage. And I actually, if you go through this article, you'll see I told you how it's going to play out. And so far that matches. And by the way, I also told you about the Fed and them unwinding. That's this tapering. Look at this thing that says tapering. I told you about the Mag 7 pump and to watch out for a crash, that I thought those were overvalued and I wouldn't be in them if it was me. Here we get into, again, sort of this notion of tapering and how many assets the Fed holds and what the logical conclusion of tapering would be. So that's something you need to learn about. I told you about tokens and smart contracts and ape and how that all plays into something I'm calling the great unwinding. Got a whole playlist on that, or I've used that hashtag a lot on Twitter if you want to see more. And it seems to be playing out. These are the things. So I'm just saying there's a whole set of stuff that over the last 3 years I've been telling you, a lot of it really over the last 9 months, and it's exactly what's playing out. So I had kind of seen some of this. The rumblings were there, so you can see towards the end of July I was posting really just saying, hey, foundation is secure. If you're sort of AMC, Bitcoin, Gamestop, the wave is coming, and just hold strong. There's something else I was saying in that. I'm going to keep that to myself. But so look for the people who can show you what's going on, who seem to have a level of peace in the storm, and because it's going to be chaotic for a little while. It just is. We're seeing a large, many-year sort of kingdom that got built, which is being dismantled. And I guess for me, there's this idea too of, you have to pick up your sword. And I don't mean that in any kind of violent way. In some cases, there's a kind of warrior who fights for what's good and wants to stand up for what's right. And so for me, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is this idea of you have to pick up your sword. And then last night, I was kind of just saying, hey, it's okay. That was when in the overnight, like GameStop was way down, Bitcoin was way down, AMC was way down, and you see what's going on with AMC. So there's some symbolism there. Just some of you will understand that. It's just some things I believe about AMC. So I would just say, calm in the storm. understand this is what was always going to play out. And so if it's what's been sort of signaled for many years and it plays out, and if it's sort of what I view as very dark, corrupt, manipulative players who are sort of finally starting to maybe have to pay a price, let it play out. That's okay. So, what are the pieces? I kind of just talked about all this. Let's sort of summarize, and then we're almost done here. So, I told you about Archegos, Credit Suisse, Nomura. That's just kind of still echoing through the system. 2008 was never cleaned up, neither was 2020. Tokens and smart contracts are out there lingering. The Bank of Japan is seeing decades of policies, kind of consumerism. They're trying to support a consumerist culture and population problems. It's a shrinking population. And all of this is kind of hitting the fan. And so the entire globe has been kind of connected into that pump, and you're having to see an unwinding. Shorts have piled on to AMC in particular, and AMC is now profitable. Go back and look at my last video. I reviewed the earnings and I showed you what's next. I've been extremely accurate on forecasts with AMC, have beaten Wall Street every quarter for a couple of years now, and I've got the receipts to prove that. AMC, starting in June and forward, was profitable. July was even bigger than June and all of that. So I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. But, GameStop is flush with $4 billion of cash, and I believe Bitcoin is entering kind of its sort of golden era of sort of being kind of the strong player in the room. Let's put it that way. Central banks, politicians, and top corporations have been using policies for generations to control outcomes, which are enriching the 0.1%. I'm not even talking about the 1%. I'm talking about the 0.1%. They're funding wars, and they're keeping, I'll just kind of use the term, the matrix in control. And so, yeah, it's that pick up your sword kind of thing. And that's, in some ways, even videos like this is me doing that. Narratives are used to avoid acknowledging what's real. So, you're seeing like Bloomberg and others kind of were talking about Iran and saber rattling and all that. In the meantime, this is stuff that's been developing for years, and you can kind of show, in a way, let's say mathematically, what's really going on. So I would just continue to sort of, take off blindfolds and don't just accept narratives and start to sort of see what's real. That's my encouragement to all of you. So, few comments, and then we'll kind of close out in a minute here. This is basically just the thesis confirming. So it's okay. Watch for who told you what was coming, and watch actually for kind of who hid it from you. Who were the sort of puppets and mouthpieces who were steering you to look away and look at other things. Obviously people joke about people like Kramer, who inverse Kramer and all those kind of things. But there are a lot of mouthpieces out there in terms of news media, both written and television. And even I would say a lot of so-called, good guys who are, let's say, all over Twitter and TikTok and others, who are kind of getting propped up because they're voices that influence you and shift your attention and manipulate you. So start to see who told you what was really happening and who gave you distractions and even outright lies. As far as AMC, we just set an all-time June record. Again, if you're new here or maybe you're not really here for AMC, I would just really encourage you to go back and look at my last video, which tears apart AMC's earnings and actually points the way forward. I have a lot of skill in financial analysis, and I kind of show you what's going on there. But if you don't know, June was only the 16th biggest ever June at the box office. That's not a very impressive thing, right? Number 16 for the month at the box office. Yet for AMC, it was the biggest profitability month of any June in 104 years. So AMC set an all-time June record on a box office that was only 16th best. That's where AMC is going. July was an even bigger box office than that, if you don't know. And we're still rolling through the rest of the year. There's a lot of big movies. And AMC, again, if you're not an AMC person, it's a lot more than a movie company now. You'd need to go do some DD and learn about that. And I've got plenty of videos. Look at my fundamentals playlist. But then 2025 and 2026 continues rapid growth. See some notes I posted today on Twitter about operating leverage, or just, again, see that video on the earnings recap. I talk about that topic. Bitcoin, I just honestly think the suppression and these dips is not sustainable. If you look into, it's been like a month or two of constant buying, outpacing mining. So in other words, people are buying more than what the new supply is. You just do the math in your head on that in terms of supply and demand. That's not sustainable for it to not just start flying. Supply and demand says that's going to become a real upward pressure. And so I believe, honestly, that. Oh, and by the way, Bitcoin mining is also at all-time highs in terms of difficulty. Look at something called the hash rate. Um, and now you've got companies and governments saying they want it in their strategic reserve as a reserve currency. So I think it's just really obvious if you think through everything I just showed you, that I showed you stuff years and months in advance. If you believe I'm going to continue to be right, then what I'm telling you, my thesis, my point of view, is Bitcoin has a massive breakout coming. The only question is when. So that's why I just don't sweat these dips. I'd love to have my cost average down, although I really started getting in the 30s, to be honest. You could see that's when I started tweeting about it and making videos about it. But I'd love to buy the dips. I don't have a lot of cash right now to buy them, but I'm also not sweating. AMC and Gamestop swaps, that's still, and you can kind of gather actually, by the way, from DFV's tweets, and I think his timing, that he's reminding us, I believe, this is opinion, this is belief, but I believe he's reminding us about the swaps. That is still an issue. And definitely I believe strongly about the tokens. And then, GameStop has all the cash on hand. So just that is the bigger picture going on as there's this massive global financial unwinding. In fact, let's just say what's next, what's coming. So if I've been right on, I don't know, in sort of some ways being a prophet, and telling you what would happen ahead of time, then let's see what I can get right on some of these things. So this is me sort of signaling what comes next. You will see the market over, and I'm talking over the next few years. So this is going to be the trend, I believe. Focus on valuations. So I think if I sort of speak, I don't know, personally for a minute, I think I may be able to help provide a lot of value to everybody because, that's what I've been doing for a while. And by the way, that's where, DFV started his journey, right? He was saying, it's deep freaking value. Only he doesn't say freaking. You will see in a bear market, I believe, more of a focus on valuations and this second bullet, a flight to quality. I'm going down, not left to right. So focus on valuations, flight to quality. What you want to do is start learning. How do you identify value plays? How do you identify growth plays that maybe don't yet reflect the future cash flows they're going to generate and the future profits? And how do you kind of find, you might say, for example, you could argue, let's say an Apple stock, which is part of the Mag 7, is high quality. That is a cash generating machine, but it may not have been at the right valuation. So you got to focus on both of these things. What are quality investments that don't reflect the value they should have? And you believe that over time, business results will force the market to revalue those stocks. We'll talk a lot about that. I'll work on sharing some of that in the future. Volatility is just going to be around for a while. For you traders, I'm not a TA guy, I'm a value guy, so that's why that was my first bullet. But for you traders, volatility can really be your friend. So learn to sort of have your discipline, have your approach, and watch for some of that volatility. It may offer you some opportunities. But then for the rest of us, if you're hodling or anything like that, it's not a time to have a high anxiety. You just know that there's volatility and you're ready to stomach that. Never get in deeper than you can afford. That's that leverage comment. I would be very, very careful about leverage. Please go read that Reddit article. Talks about how you can kind of lose your shirt and actually demonstrates how that works. Macros matter. So macroeconomics, there's a large reason why it has been clear to me what was coming and I didn't buy into some of the hype and the pumps. You're seeing leverage getting washed out. I just said be very careful about leverage. I cannot underscore that enough. And then I think, so second bullet on the right, there's going to be this push-pull between, sort of money printer go burr and living in a sane world. And then I'll connect that to, because, by the way, so the money printer go burr is basically making your price of bread and your clothes cost more. That's not a sane world. That's not okay. And it's not a good policy, and it hasn't worked for the people. Go back to the time that fiat was created, when we got ourselves off of the silver standard and off of the gold standard. Ever since then, everything, I tell my children all the time, to the point they're starting to repeat this line, so that Stuff is not costing more. Your money is worth less. The US dollar and other fiat currencies have been going down consistently for 50 to 70 years, very consistently. If you got a 50 to 70 year trend, I don't think you can sort of argue against that. So there's going to be this push pull because in a meltdown, you're going to see stimulus and a need for pumping the economy again. Well, we keep doing that and then we keep having real problems getting created from that. And so that's why I'm saying there's a push and a pull between that. We'll talk more about that in the future. I'm going to talk a little bit on more of a, I don't know, philosophical level for a second. I believe we're at a moment, and I think, in a generation or two, we'll really see the outcome of this. But I believe, and this is why I say, like, pick up your sword. We're shifting from a greed, zero-sum game, get yours, greed is good kind of a culture, to a culture of, and not just a culture, a financial system that is wired for destroying other people for your own benefit. And by the way, I basically am a capitalist. I'm not talking about capitalism is all bad. I don't actually even believe the U.S. is a capitalist system. I believe the U.S. is a crony system driven by captured regulation, captured politicians, and central bankers. It's just buddies helping each other. That's not capitalism. That's central planning, right? We basically have centralization. True capitalism, and I guess I'm being philosophical here, is decentralized. It is, microtransactions. It is you and your neighbor. I got tomatoes, you got potatoes, tomatoes and potatoes, right? That's the old joke. Let's trade. And I suppose I'm describing a barter system, but I'm just going to derail if I get into arguing all kinds of hundreds of years of arguments on this topic. And we can all talk about that over a beer friendly someday or coffee. But I want to be part of shifting to an abundance mentality. There is enough. There is enough for all of us. But what we first have to do is stop the people who are hoarding. There's this story I like to tell. Maybe some of you have heard of, and don't jump on me if this isn't quite scientifically accurate, but it's a metaphor, and I think it holds. If you've ever heard of the Dead Sea over in the Middle East, what I've always heard is that basically water pours in and doesn't really go out. There's kind of no outlet. And so if you think about hoarding things, there is resources and money and capital coming in and nothing going out. Well, what's happened at the Dead Sea over time is it's just built up salt. And it's called the Dead Sea for a reason. There's nothing living in it because there's no outflow. There's no refresh. There's no freshening. It's not fresh water. And I have always lived my life by this notion that if I have resources, if I have good things, then it's not only for me, it is to make things better for somebody else. Something I tell my kids too is we don't say no fair unless we're talking about the fact that somebody else doesn't have enough. They don't have what they need. It's a mind shift to saying, I'm going to notice when other people need something, and I'm going to say, you know what? I have enough. I'm not going to live in fear and hold on to everything and hoard things. I'm going to start sharing things. And now there's flow and there's newness and there's freshness. So, I know some of you are probably tuning out because you're not with me, but some of you are with me and you're getting this and you understand we need to shift from greed to abundance. We need to shift from dark to light, and we need to shift to a new way because what we're doing keeps hurting the people. What we're doing, the systems and the kingdoms of this world right now are creating war, they're creating conflict, they're creating poverty, they're creating rage, they're creating oppression, they're creating chaos and depression, they're creating anger and anxiety and human trafficking and all kinds of problems. And do you want more of that? Because I don't. I want something better for my children and my grandchildren, for you and for your friends. I want a way that says I'm going to notice what someone else needs and I'm going to act like there's enough and we're going to share. And I'm not talking about socialism. I'm not talking about communism. I'm talking about a new way of leading that honors humanity. So I want you to just think about that and see what changes start to happen in your mind and in your heart when you start thinking abundance instead of greed. I do believe that's where we're going. If I can be any kind of prophet or seer or forecaster or whatever. I'm talking about not today, not tomorrow, but over the coming days, weeks, months, even decades, even generations. That's the shift. And if you want to see any kind of change, you got to start looking for actual leaders who lead with this kind of stuff and not people who just enrich the wallets of their buddies. Lastly, on this channel, I always say we will win, and I usually end with that, but I want to share just a couple quick messages to some people I know are listening. So I'm going to reiterate, I said pick up your sword. For those of you who wonder what I'm talking about again, I'm talking about philosophically, I'm talking about working for good, working for the light. And there is a mirror out there, and so I'm going to talk to you, and I know you see me, and I've seen you for quite some time. And I just want to give you a message. Counterfeits will always be rejected. And in the new way, only what's real will last. Last thing for just everybody who's picking up what I'm dropping down, keep your eyes fixed on what you can't see that is real, as opposed to what people are showing you, which is fake. We got this. It's okay.